Jeff Sessions is at it again. Every time I think I can take a break from this guy and do a story about something else, he comes along and says another thing that kind of takes me by surprise or makes me start to wonder if he wasn't serious about cracking down on marijuana in places like Colorado. The latest thing here is just over the top. So we have Jeff Sessions talking to the Department of Justice. And yeah, let me set this up. I'm going to read a little more than you might have seen if you've seen this story getting out. The only thing you really saw was the last little bit where he's talking specifically about his feelings towards marijuana again. And it's starting to sound more and more like the narrative that he's trying to craft is that marijuana's legalization is like this relaxing of our attitude towards drugs, and we don't want to enforce marijuana, so it's given, the bad idea. It's given the youth the wrong idea about doing drugs. So, and then combine that with the cartels coming in with supposedly breaking crimes, and he loosely ties that to marijuana in his overall narrative. He's not going to add to that on this one, but what he's doing is overall trying to make it sound like marijuana legalization is a symbol of like the police have lost a battle and people don't care about since people are so lax about marijuana, then they're going to be lax about other drugs, and that's tied into this massive problem we have with the opioid problem. So let's just go and read some of these. This isn't by far not even close to the whole speech that he gave to the Department of Justice on Wednesday, March 15th, but it's the part that I felt was important. I excerpted this three-step thing that he's talking about, and you'll see when I get there, but here we go. So he says, the latest FBI data tell us that from 2014 to 2015, the violent crime rate in the U.S. increased by more than 3%, the largest one-year increase since 1991. The murder rate increased 10%, the largest increase since 1968. And all of this taking place amid an unprecedented epidemic of heroin and opioid abuse. To turn back this rising tide of violent crime, we need to confront the heroin and opioid crisis in our nation and dismantle the transnational cartels that bring drugs and violence into our neighborhoods. Our nation is in the throes of a heroin and opioid epidemic. Overdose deaths more than tripled between 2010 and 2014. According to the CDC, about 140 Americans on average now die from drug overdose each day. That means every 3 weeks we are losing as many American lives to the drug overdoses as we lost in the 9/11 attacks. Let that sink in. Illegal drugs are flooding across our southern border and into cities across the country, bringing violence, addiction, and misery. That is a scapegoat to where this opioid epidemic really stems from, Mr. Sessions. Really, the opioid epidemic stems from the over-prescribing and just beating down of the citizens of this country with the manufacture of these opioid drugs. Over-manufacture, over-prescribing, and how do they even get into the streets? It isn't the Mexican drug cartels bringing these American-made, American-sold, American-bought drugs that are killing people every day. That's not the Mexican cartels bringing this crap in. If you're talking about the heroin, how can you be talking about heroin, cracking down on the heroin out of one side of your mouth, and then on the other side of your brain, you realize that we're over in Afghanistan protecting all those poppy fields so that the heroin trade can go on without a hitch? I don't understand this heroin thing. If you don't want heroin to be a thing, then stop protecting it in Afghanistan and all the trade routes that leads it to here. So he's saying that illegal drugs are flooding across the southern border. I don't think that's even true. Prove that that's a big deal. I mean, they nab people all the time with drugs, and cartels are getting them here somehow. But I don't think that that's the very bulk of the actual drugs that are getting into the country. We have also seen an increase in trafficking of new low cost heroin by Mexican drug cartels working with local street gangs. As the market for this heroin expands, gangs fight for territory, and new customers and neighborhoods are caught in the crossfire. I don't know how much of this is really true, what he's talking about. Sounds like it's a 1970s movie or something. But if it is true, it has nothing to do with marijuana. But he goes on, and he says that there are three main ways to fight the scourge of drugs: criminal enforcement, treatment, and prevention. Now, the Republicans have always had a big emphasis on the first one, the criminal enforcement, and the third one, prevention. They put a lot of stock in prevention. They think that if you can prevent someone from doing drugs, it's worth $1 million in Just Say No commercials. Or, you can get Nancy Reagan on TV saying dare this and just say no that. I mean, what is all that? What did that really do? While you were doing that, the rate of drugs didn't increase or decrease. It didn't do anything. All those prevention programs are garbage. All it did is educate people that were young, too young to even know what drugs even were in the first place. I've seen DARE programs go into places where it was like elementary school, like before even fifth grade. So you're teaching kids that probably wouldn't even have known what drugs was in the first place, what drugs are. And then you're getting kids to narc on their parents. That's why you go into schools younger and younger, so you can get kids to identify their parents as drug users. And mainly this is all to do with marijuana. All to do with marijuana. All this prevention and enforcement crap all comes down on marijuana. If you look at the charts, marijuana was the number one federally, number one drug that if you went to federal prison for drugs, usually possession or minor deal, some kind of a trafficking charge, but nothing major. Something that most of the people that are in there for nonviolent drug offenses, that's what they're in there for. And guess what? Marijuana has been the number one drug for that since the 1970s. You would think, more people out there, the violent drugs, that's in the cocaine and the heroin world, where gangsters run, serious game on drug dealing. And I don't know. It's like they've been pretty much enforcing their criminal enforcement on marijuana. Every time you pull somebody over and you find marijuana, they enforce it. So it's the number one drug that's enforced. If you go to the court and look at the dockets, it's mostly marijuana still everywhere you go when it comes to drugs, illegal drugs. Now, I would say that prescription drugs are making the docket a lot more because a lot of people are getting caught up in this prescription drug thing where they are getting caught without the prescription for the drug that they have on their possession. And these penalties for that is pretty stiff. So anyway, he's going to talk about enforcement. Criminal enforcement is essential to stop both the transnational cartels that ship drugs into our country and the thugs and gangs who use violence and extortion to move their product. One of the president's executive orders directed the Justice Department to dismantle these organizations and gangs, and we will do just that. Treatment programs are also vital, but treatment often comes too late to save people from addiction or death. And that's all he's going to give treatment. He's not going to say anything about the government's going to, start up more, invest in more treatment centers and focus more on getting people the help that they need. No, we're just going to keep going on, with the enforcement. Yeah, sure, treatment works when it's too late and somebody's life is already ruined. Well, that's the point, man, is if you could catch somebody when they want help instead of after they've already gone down to rock bottom and you scrape them out of the bottom of some prison somewhere and then they want to get clean because they have no choice. Yeah, you're going about it all wrong. So anyway, he says we need to focus on the third way we can fight drug use, preventing people from ever taking drugs in the first place. This is like teaching abstinence to children none of this works. None of it works. And like I said earlier, it backfires because now you're educating people that would have never even known about drugs until they were in their teen years. Now you're telling them about drugs when they're 4 or 5 years old. As soon as they get into school and they learn their ABCs, oh, time to tell them about drugs. Why? What is the point of that? Ain't that the parents' responsibility to have that talk? Like when kids are old enough to have that talk? Who mandated the government to come in and tell the kids about drugs when they're little kids and they're supposed to still be thinking about playing and stuff? That's you guys. That's the Republicans always dare just say no. All that fucking garbage was Republican programs. And none of it worked. Get that? Did you get that? Did you ever see any of that shit work? Did it do any reduction in people doing, getting started doing drugs? So that's your prevention. Prevent people from ever doing drugs. And the second caveat of his prevention program, of course, is that marijuana is a gateway drug. Now, he's about to lead into that right here. Too many lives are... Okay, I realize that this may be an unfashionable belief in a time of growing tolerance of drug use. It's not that people have a growing tolerance of drug use. They always pretty much have. It's that the police are getting sick of enforcing these drug laws because they're not stopping the drugs. You have a 40-year-long failed policy, the worst failure of any policy ever made, and that would be the drug war, ramping up all the penalties for drug offenses, putting new drugs on these schedules. It all happened under Richard Nixon in 1971. That's when the drug war, as we know it, started. And it's cost $1 trillion. And all the people that got locked up, well over 80% of them was for nonviolent marijuana possession. Well, not possession, but the possession was at least 51% of all marijuana people jailed. Now, this is when you're talking about the federal government's crackdown. We're not even talking about state crackdowns and all the people that went to jail because of that. We're just talking specifically about the DEA, their budget, and all the prosecutions that had to happen. I don't know if that really takes into account all the cost of jailing all these people, but if it didn't, that would be a big injustice because that's probably one of the biggest things no one talks about. You want to keep this drug war alive. It's costing a lot of money. You have to send the evidence to the lab. You have to warehouse the evidence. You have to have the person that did the drug offense has to be warehoused or bailed. And then you have to give this person a trial and tie up court time, maybe even get a jury together. This is ridiculous that we have that much. You think we have that much money to spend on this shit? Anyway, no, it's not fashionable. It's very unfashionable that you think that you're going to go out there and try to just say no to dare somebody to not do drugs. All right, Jeff Sessions. Why do you keep talking about failed fucking policies? Oh, yeah, that's right, because you're a Republican and you think that this shit works. You think that the drug war is a good thing because your police buddies tell you that they've never been so bored as to when you legalize marijuana. But the vast majority of the police in Colorado will tell you that legalizing marijuana has been nothing but a good thing, including the mayor of Denver, who used to be against marijuana legalization, and including the police chief of Denver, who was totally against legalizing marijuana. On the record, even as early when the November elections was going on, he was on record telling people in Massachusetts and Maine that he was against legalizing marijuana, and he didn't think it wasn't working very well in Colorado, whatever that means. So your idea is fucking hog shit, man. Too many lives are at stake to worry about being fashionable. Well, the lives are at stake because of the opioid epidemic. And you have a Rite Aid or a CVS or a Walgreens or some kind of pill mill, pain clinic on every damn corner in every town in every state. And you're sitting here scratching your head looking at marijuana every time you mention this fucking epidemic. Too many lives are at stake. Do something about the opioid problem. What are you talking about? I would reject the idea that America will be a better place if marijuana is sold on every corner store. He goes there again. Again, it would be a lot safer than if you had all these Walgreens and Rite Aids on every corner, because those are the drugs that are killing people. And if it ain't outright with the opioids, it's straight up taking too many of them and falling over dead, like 140 people a day are doing, according to your own statement. That's 140 people a day. That's like 5 classrooms full of kids every day dying. Do you give a shit about that, Jeff Sessions? You keep talking about marijuana. It doesn't have anything to do with that shit. Nothing. Marijuana has zero to do with the opioid problem. The opioid problem is the opioid problem. Everybody in America acknowledges that. Everybody's smart enough to know that. Nobody's stupid enough to think that marijuana has anything to do with the opioid problem. Why would you keep saying this? Hasn't somebody let you know that you're totally out of line with this line of thinking? That nobody in mainstream anywhere thinks this way? Anyway, you are paid to say this by somebody or told to because the pharmaceutical industry they're sick of it. They want to see marijuana getting cracked down on because it's hurting their bottom line. The opioid overdose deaths ain't killing their patients off fast enough because a lot of them are running towards marijuana and quitting that shit. Now, I'm not trying to be disparaging to people that have to take opioids, because there is a lot of people that actually have to take opioids. You know, just because you stubbed your toe and the doctor gave you Vicodins, that don't mean you have to take opioids, all right? There's people that have to take opioids. They got serious things going on that marijuana, I'm sure, would treat, but, of course, you have to have medical marijuana. You can't just smoke a couple joints of Mexican brickweed and think that you're going to treat, like, MS. It's not going to happen. You know, you need some serious doses of marijuana. So anyway, and you're not going to get that unless you have it in every corner store. So sorry, again, Sessions, you're wrong. Here he goes with, and I am astonished to hear people suggest that we can solve our heroin crisis by legalizing marijuana, so people can trade one life-wrecking dependency for another that's only slightly less awful. Our nation needs to say clearly once again that using drugs will destroy your life. Well, then tell people to quit using cigarettes, because that kills 500,000 people a year. Tell people to quit. Don't do the alcohol. That's a drug. Alcohol is the most dangerous drug that we know of. Legal prescription medications, not even opioids, but just general over everyday pills, kill more people than illegal drugs. All illegal drugs put together. Of course, the worst of the worst is the opioids. So if you aren't prescribed opioids, obviously, you should stay clear of those, because all you should see when you look at a bottle of opioids is skull and crossbones. But that's the industry that Jeff Sessions is out there trying to protect. All right? He's saying these things because he don't want his minions to get mad about him not, throwing salt at marijuana, because marijuana's throwing salt at them. And their bottom line is coming up hurt. We see the numbers all the time, anywhere from, people stop doing opioids in states where medical marijuana is legal, is anywhere from the 12% mark to the 30% mark I've seen. And people that, like the overdose death rates in those states, has also seen sharp, dramatic decreases. So you got a problem with that? What is wrong with you? And his whole statement here that marijuana dependency is a life-wrecking dependency that is only slightly less awful than heroin. He said heroin. So I don't know if you guys out there know anybody that's on heroin or has an addiction problem and heroin's their thing. But if you do know anything about that, you will know that heroin is definitely one of the most awful things that you could be addicted to. It does the worst things to you. Living through a heroin addiction, you're lucky to come out the other side of it alive. You're lucky to come out of it the other side with anything that resembles a life that you had before you went in. This is the most absurd statement I've ever heard, man. This statement is so devoid of thought and heart and personal experience and knowledge. This is just the most unreasonable statement that Jeff Sessions has yet made. But I'm going to get to one that's even more unreasonable. But so far today, up until this point, that is the most unreasonable statement I've ever heard Jeff Sessions make. Only slightly less awful than being addicted to heroin. And he says that marijuana is a life-wrecking dependency. Marijuana is not even a dependency that could make you an addict. So, hey, Jeff Sessions, you're a fucking idiot. I just got to say that once in a while. In the 80s and 90s, we saw how campaigns stressing prevention brought down drug use and addiction. No, we didn't. That didn't do anything to those numbers at all. So that's a fucking bullshit statement on its face. We can do this again. Educating people and telling them the terrible truth about drugs and addiction will result in better choices. No, it didn't. This is all bullshit, Jeff. You're fucking wrong. Flat out. Just say no. Dare didn't do shit. All it did is waste a bunch of money on campaigns that fucking didn't do nothing but educate people, maybe too young, about what drugs are. And it didn't even really fucking do that. Are you telling me that you really educated people about making good choices with DARE programs and shit? You gotta be fucking kidding me. You're a joke, Sessions. We can reduce the use of drugs, save life, and turn back the surge in crime that inevitably follows in the wake of increased drug abuse. So there he does it. He tied all that shit he said in the first part of this whole thing, the speech, like I was telling you. He tied all that, with the violence and the increased opioid use and the gangsters and this and that. He just tied all that shit to marijuana by making it sound like, any kind of increase in increased drug abuse, or it's not drug abuse he was talking about. He's talking about marijuana being this thing that if it's okay, if people think that that's okay, then everybody's going to think that all drugs are okay. Well, you're the one making it that way. If you make people think that marijuana is almost as bad as heroin, then people that just did marijuana at this point in time might be like, really? Heroin's not that bad then, huh? Let me try that out. So that would be on you. I don't even know. I mean, it sounds more legitimate than when you're saying that someone's going to go from marijuana to heroin because I don't even know what, because because overall society feels a little better about drugs. That's a fucking bunch of horse shit, man. We will enforce our laws and put bad men behind bars. We will fight the scourge of drug abuse. He sounds like someone from like the 1950s on one of those black and white propaganda movies. It's just utterly insane. Together, let us act to meet this challenge so that our children will not look back and say that we let slip from our grasp all we had done to make America a safer place. All right, that was some horse shit, but this is even more horse shitty than that. Jeff Sessions says medical marijuana has been hyped, maybe too much. What are you talking about? So in this story from Alabama.com, we are looking at the life of Lena, who suffered a stroke when she was 34 days old. One of the complications of the stroke was seizures, which Young said she responds well to cannabidiol treatment. Here's a tweet she sent out about Jeff. Lena is alive today because of medical marijuana treatment. Sorry, Jeff, that's not hype. That's just fact. So, yeah, Sessions is basically, this was after the speech. He was getting hit up by reporters, and the speech was in Richmond, Virginia. So he basically, on his way out, did a quick interview, and that's what he said on a question maybe about medical marijuana. Well, since then, the tweet world is lit up with a lot of people talking about him and his statement. This one here that I read earlier. It's absurd to say that marijuana is only slightly less awful than heroin. And then it's absurd to say that it might not be medicine. Like, that's just hype. 92% of patients say medical marijuana works. So that's not hype. That's not hype at all. And like I was saying, we go back to this article. Amy Young's daughter, Lena, I should say, is able to live a normal life. So whenever someone can live any kind of a normal life because of cannabis, you're crazy to say that it's overhyped. But we have more things than that. We have a 2013 survey in the New England Journal of Medicine found that nearly 8 in 10 doctors approve the use of medical marijuana. So they know they're the ones that read up on it. And then the two that don't approve percent, they're probably paid, or not 2%, but 20%. They're probably paid to say that, oh no, I'm not for it. They're not going to tell you why. So a wide-ranging survey in California finds that medical marijuana patients agree. 92% said that medical marijuana alleviated symptoms of their serious medical conditions, including chronic pain, arthritis, migraines, and cancer. Now that's that's the sentence Big Pharma, they shriek when they hear it. They shriek. And then they call Jeff Sessions on the phone and they say, we got to do something about this marijuana shit because, we're losing patients all the time on chronic pain, arthritis, migraines, cancer. Cancer is like a big, big multi-billion-dollar industry. When you tell them that people are doing less chemo because of cannabis, that's not stuff they want to hear. All right, now this survey was between 7,525 California adults and by the Public Health Institute in partnership with the Center for Disease Control. Researchers found that in total, 5% of California adults say they used medical marijuana for a serious medical condition. Now, the study, basically this just says that the study was of all different age groups, and although young adults were most likely to use it. Absolutely no difference in prevalence between the racial ethnic groups and less than 3 percentage points, which may not have much importance in practical terms. All right. And finally, last but not least, if you want, you can just search Google for more marijuana testimonials. I'll put a link to this page down below, as well as a video I found on YouTube that has a bunch of extra videos on the side where it recommends videos like the video. And basically, when you look into it, or Phoenix Tears by Rick Simpson has thousands of testimonials. But when you look into it, you can find testimonials, and when you watch individual testimonials or read about people's testimonials, it's really amazing how medical marijuana is awesome and how awesome it is. And for Jeff Sessions to make these statements that medical marijuana is hype, it just shows you that he is definitely not open to learning anything new about medical marijuana or marijuana in general. He learned about marijuana in the back of some church in some backwoods Alabama, whatever, a long, long time ago, and he's never going to change his mind about marijuana. Never. But Sessions, you are absolutely insane if you think that you're going to get away with this narrative leading to some kind of crackdown on the recreational marijuana industry. You're goofy. Well, I'll give you that already. But if you think you're going to go after the medical marijuana industry, you are really insane. You are like bat, guano. You're snorting this shit, man. You're snorting bat shit.